Yeah, there it is on there.
I've got a bill. What do you say? About 6,000. 44 dollars.
What the heck is that?
Replace all that junk.
Really?
Get burned up. Buildings all stopped up, burned up, cracked, and everything else.
You know what we use ours is scratch. Some folks go out there and still got it on.
We didn't know it all done.
It's still running. That was like 4 months ago. It's got all that honeycomb stuff in that thing. The first section was broke, roughed all of it out, put it back on, and then everything come back
Well,
on.
it's got that old safety, now it's down, they work.
Yeah.
But if they think that it's gone or something,
Is that on the truck? Hey, they got Mike on the same thing. Mayor.
Great.
Hey, Mayor, how you doing?
Good.
Good to see you, Joe. Oh, we're not bumping elbows, just fist bump.
Bill Meredith bump.
All right, let's go.
Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. This meeting of the Washington County Board of Commissioners is now in session. Pursuant to adjournment with the Honorable Chairman Greg Baddeley presiding, come to order and remain standing.
Thank you, Sheriff. Our first order of business this evening is our prayer that will be led by Commissioner Wheeler and our pledge that will be led by Commissioner McAllister.
If we would, before we pray this evening, if you join me in a moment of silence in remembrance of our longtime trustee, Jack Hammond. Father, we come before you as season of Thanksgiving, in that spirit. Thank you for the opportunity to gather here tonight under this system of government that allows us to freely work on behalf of the citizens of Washington County. We ask that you guide and direct our deliberations and decisions this evening. and we ask that you be with the family of Jack and others in the community in need this week. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
And now let's honor America. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll move to the roll call screen and indicate your presence here this evening. All right, Madam Clerk. We have 15 present, 0 absent. Next item is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Edens, seconded by Commissioner Carrigan. Discussion? Seeing none, all of those in favor of approving the agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. We do have public comment this evening. Mr. Reeves, if you'll come forward to the podium and our standard 3 minutes of procedure.
James Reeves, 125 Cindy Ann Drive, Gray, Tennessee. August 2016, most of you guys weren't here, we approved 40-cent tax increase. And I watched approximately 20 people come in here and say that the Boones Creek Round School was a disaster. And for the most part, it probably is my kids to go there. And it was approved. Well, you know, it's evolved into there was a resolution that didn't occur until January 2017 that was approved by the legislation here, that we're going to spend $25 million on the Boones Creek project, which did not at the time include the athletic fields. We still got to figure that out. And $20.7 million on the Jonesboro project. There's been some contention that the money may be gone, that we waited too long, the school board took forever. They couldn't get in that $20.8 million. They kept sending something to committee that was over budget. Well, they finally sent something to committee last month that was at budget. There was some discussion, total project, $20.8 million, construction costs, $17.5 million. There's some land that's got to be bought. But it's under the number that was decided by the county commission and the mayor at the time that they could spend in Jonesboro. I've been following the budget in this county since 2006. Where the pennies go, where the money goes. I don't worry about a lot of the smaller stuff, but some of the bigger stuff matters. As far as I can tell, we've spent nearly $30 million on the Boones Creek project, and 5 cents has been put in debt service to cover the money that has been borrowed. 21 cents is still sitting in the capital projects fund. That's $6 million a year. Simple math tells me, well, it's not so simple. If you bond out $40 million, which is enough to give Johnson City their share, and do the money for Jonesboro at 5%, that's 11 cents. The money exists. If the executive branch would like to sit down and show me where the money's going to go or where it's gone, I'll sit down and do that. But until then, the money exists. Don't let them tell you any different. Just this year, through the capital projects, $5 million passes through. In other words, they couldn't spend it fast enough. Another thing I'd like to mention, since this capital project fund was created, before that existed, when funding needed to be done to fix the courthouse and those type of things, it came out of the general fund balance, which has approximately, I don't know at this point, but it's over $16 million. If you move some money around and do things, you can probably pay some cash on this school thing. They don't want to do it. They don't want to borrow the money. They don't want to increase their debt. It's not economic development like the Boones Creek School is. We're not going to build a bunch of houses around it. But a verbal agreement was made in August 2016 that we would build a school and renovate the other Jonesboro school. At the time, they were just going to renovate the Round School. But the parents complained, says, how can you just say the same thing about the Round Boones Creek School and not the same thing about Jonesboro? And it took 2 years for the Education Committee to get under budget. And now it's been shelved. But I want you all to know the money's still there. Still exists.
James, you reached your 3 minutes.
Good.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your comments. All right, that concludes our public hearing for this evening. Madam Clerk, if you'll. Next item in your packet is the minutes of the November 13th Washington County Planning Commission meeting. Find those on page 5. We also have a presentation this evening by the TIF Advisory Board and the JCDA. Ms. Cantler's here with us this evening regarding the TIF and the facts about how it is working in Washington County. Diana, if you're here. I thought I seen you up here earlier.
Yes, sir. We're going to see if technology works.
We hope it does.
I appreciate you having us. Craig Torba is with me. He's the chair of the TIF Advisory. And we just wanted to go over a few things just to let you know how TIF is working in downtown Johnson City and Washington County. Oops, that didn't work. We have a PowerPoint. You go to that little arrow at the very bottom. Does that advance the slide? There we go. So a little background information on TIF. The goal of tax increment financing is to encourage economic revitalization and assist with private development projects that would really not be able to occur without some public sector participation. Just the background, the TIF redevelopment plan was adopted by Washington County in 2008 as a method to help with the revitalization of the downtown blighted area. Next slide. For those of you that haven't maybe participated in some TIF, either advisory board or heard how we bring a project to the county, I wanted to let you know we have a guidelines that we use to bring TIF to the county and the city. And we have guidelines that we really, objectives that we try to accomplish with TIF. The main one is to eliminate blighted, dilapidated, or deteriorating conditions, to really work with property owners to redevelop historic buildings in the redevelopment district. Other things that we try and do is to create, we look for projects that help create job opportunities, and will revitalize a commercial or retail space. Our goal is to expand the property tax base and also generate direct sales tax revenue. We want to make the most use of the land that we have in the redevelopment district. We don't want to, we really would rather not tear down buildings. We really would rather revitalize those buildings. We want to make sure that our goal is to fill every building in the redevelopment district, not to have vacant buildings. Historic preservation is a main focus of the TIF, and that's where it becomes such a tool, because that is such an expensive, a lot of times it's expensive to do that to existing structures. And then architectural continuity is real important. You know, we really, especially in the historic district of the Real Development District, we want to make sure that we have architectural continuity, that we can restore a building to its where it was, how it was intended to look. Next slide, please. Part of the plan can be used for infrastructure, including improving parking facilities, links, whether it's walking trails or pedestrian or bike or driving lanes to the central business district. I think we have found that everything that happens in downtown really does have an impact on the quality of life of all of the city and county residents. And so we want to create that safe, walkable community. And anything that we can do that has a public educational component in a TIF program, we really look to that. And then the other thing is, how can we take individual properties and put them together into a larger parcel that maybe works better into developing that property. So those are some of the objectives that we look at whenever a TIF application comes in front of us. To let you know how they come, before they get to you, there's several steps that they have to go through. We have a TIF application. It's a 5-page application, and that comes in front of me. And there's a lot of times that somebody will come to me and say, well, I want to use TIF for this project, and I'll take a look at it and say, you know, this is not, does not qualify for a TIF, but we have other tools that we could use. But so I do want to let you know, not everything gets past past my desk. We really make sure that can they prove the but for? Is there a reason that this project cannot take place without the use of TIF funds? If it's approved through our office, then it goes in front of the TIF advisory board. That advisory board is made up of 3 JCDA members, 2 county commission representatives or appointees, and 2 city commissioners and appointees. So it's a very good, very diverse board. Once the TIF advisory board approves a project, they will actually be the ones that decides what the amount would be that would be approved. We bring a resolution to the county for anything over $25,000. So any request over $25,000 comes to the county, and then the JCDA will vote to approve a development agreement. So that's how we put the process, the plan and process.
So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of kind of how the funding is working, how it works up till now, and kind of the benefit that does come directly back to the county, even under the current guidelines. So for every dollar of Washington County increment that is created, 13.6 cents of that goes to pay debt service back to the county. 21.6% is held back per county agreement. an additional 6.9%, and that amount does vary a little bit year to year, but that's been a pretty good average over the last several years. 6.9% is held back as uncollected, and then 57.9% out of that dollar is what actually comes back to JCDA to be used to incentivize these projects that we bring before you. So we want to make sure that that's pointed out for a couple reasons, because that really, I think there's sometimes a miscommunication or misunderstanding that by doing these TIF projects, that somehow that does not benefit the county until such time as we completely wind down the entire district. We want to point out that a little less than half of the dollars created in the increment do come directly back to the county in the current year and every year going forward, even now. So in 2018, to put those percentages into perspective of actual dollars, there was $105,455 generated that was paid back to the county that goes towards your debt service. $167,460 was held back just as a negotiated county agreement when we first established it. The agreement, that's how that was structured. Another $53,587 is retained as considered uncollected. And then the remaining $448,792 is the amount that actually got paid over to JCDA in TIF funds, which is then eligible and usable for these projects that we bring before you for economic development. So since 2008, when this was put in, just to give you some additional figures, there's been a little under $5 million, $4,880,000 of public improvements. So these are projects that we've been able to use TIF funds with your and your colleagues' support that are not specific private sector income generating, but have been quite instrumental in some of the features of downtown's rebirth. $1.6 million of that was for the pavilion, which provides space for the farmers market, event space, and additional parking in downtown. $1 million went directly back to the county when we purchased the old county courthouse from you. That was the negotiated purchase price. And then another $2.23 million was used in that facility to renovate it and make it what is now the Northeast State facility for downtown. This is trying to get, one of the things that I think also there has been sometimes some perhaps misunderstanding, and I want to try and clarify as well as I can. When we bring a project, we have to use a figure that tells us how much that project's going to generate, and then we have to assume that we might be able to fund a bond or a debt service over some period of time. We traditionally use 20 years in our calculations for that. But I think that sometimes gets mistranslated when we talk with you here at county, that means that we're somehow extending the life of that district beyond what we've talked about in 2028, 29, somewhere in that neighborhood. Just because we amortize a specific project initially or base our incentive amount on that longer amortization does not translate to extending the life of the district. And I'm going to walk you through that just briefly if I can. So these are the projects that we have in current outstanding debt. There's two projects you'll notice, and I'll touch on those here in a minute, but there's two projects that aren't listed here, and that's because they are the only two projects. So happens the first two projects we did when we implemented the district. But those two projects get treated just a little differently, and I'll explain that in just a second. But if we set those two aside, these are all the other remaining projects for which we have outstanding debt. And so you can see the total there. If we go to the next slide, that total amount of debt tells us that if we look at what our current fund balance is, we know what our current annual revenue is from both city and county, and we know what our blended interest rate is amongst all those debts that we showed you on the previous one. We can use those three numbers and report to you that as of today, if we were to simply say we're done with the redevelopment district and we're not approving any new projects, how long will it take to pay off all the debt? And the answer to that right now as we stand here before you is 4.71 years. So many of those projects that you saw on the previous screen, when we determined the amount of increment that we were able to provide in incentive, we did that using an amortization schedule based on a 20-year number. But the reality is it could and would be paid off much, much sooner if we were to simply say, we're done. We're rededicating all current cash flow to the repayment of debt, which is exactly what would happen if we were to stop approving new projects. So I'm very thankful to be able to be before you today and present this number, because I hope this will be the number that as we continue to come to you for new projects, that we can really focus on and look at. So this really gives you a good understanding of how long the current structure is to be outstanding for, and therefore kind of what our overall shape and debt structure looks like. I want to point out one other thing. If it's possible, could you go back one slide, please? One thing, too, and these numbers, we try to be very, very conservative in these numbers when we calculate that. That 4.71 years is a calculation that is using the current revenue, the revenue we have actually receiving this year. It's important to note that when you look at that list of outstanding debt that we have currently, the 4 projects that are listed at the bottom, Cherry Street, Wilson, Buffalo, and the Phase 1 of the Model Mill project, those are our most recent projects. So far, as of this year, we have not actually seen those go on the tax rolls with the higher value, and therefore the incremental value coming back into us. So we know that's coming. We haven't yet been able to exactly quantify what that is, but I wanted you to know when we calculate that 4.7 years that you saw on the next slide, that is not counting the revenue that we know is being generated or will be generated from those 4 once they get onto the active tax rolls. So we're trying to be very, very conservative when we use these numbers for you. If we could go back, please. And so these are the first 2, and I want to just kind of explain why they're a little different. They were done when the district was first put in place. We've certainly figured out since then, I think it's a much better approach to do the current way, but we need to make sure you understand that these 2 were structured a little differently. They're structured as loans. So on our books, we have to show them as loans. However, the structure of the loan was done in such a way that it effectively functions as a tax abatement for them. What we mean by that is the loan was outstanding. We've got an agreement in the loan that the annual payment cannot exceed the amount of incremental tax that we as JCDA receive. And at the end of the term of the loan, any remaining balance is simply forgiven and written off. So we have a large amount in these 2 cases of debt that we have to show on our books because it is structured that way. However, the reality is at the end of their terms, that debt is simply written off, and that's the way those were structured. So the effectiveness of this was it functions as a tax abatement on an annual basis. Unfortunately, those 2 were done that way, so that doesn't factor in quite as cleanly as what I showed you on the previous. So we are exploring some options that we might be able to take one of those and renegotiate it. We have tried to renegotiate the other one, and there's just simply not an option there for that. So unfortunately, we're kind of stuck in this piece of it outstanding, but I wanted to make sure that you were aware of that and understand how those were structured. But going forward, everything else should look more like the beginning. And then just simply the value of it. These are projects, Diana mentioned a term that we use in TIF committee meetings and is used actually within the law, which is a but-for test, which means that but for this incentive that we provide, this project could not go forward in the type of manner that we're proposing in any one of these cases. So the projects in that redevelopment district simply would not have been possible without the use of TIF or some other similar incentive. Each TIF project has been an incentive for other property owners, and that's really what we're seeing, and that's what allows that number of that 4.71 years to be as short as it is. Because what happens is, yes, we incentivize a particular project, and we may amortize that particular project on a 20-year concept, but when we see the effect of it, assuming it was a valuable project, the rising property taxes of the surrounding properties also goes up. That increment is then also captured, which allows repayment much, much faster. Since 2008, when we did this, I think this is a really fascinating number. The county appraised value, so now this is not assessment value, this is the total county appraised value, has increased by a little over $87 million in 10 years within the district. I think that's a pretty remarkable number and some really excellent growth rate. In addition to that, of course, what we don't capture and aren't able to completely quantify is how many additional jobs, sales tax, revenue, personal property tax, other things that are generated that also flow back to the county, as well as just to the quality of life of the citizens of Johnson City and Washington County both. With that, we'll take any questions. Yes, sir.
So you had a number on the number of jobs created, you got swag on it.
It's really difficult to quantify how much that number is specifically because of the TIF program. And that's for a couple of reasons. One is, as we mentioned, we may incentivize a specific project, but then the number of jobs might come from the infill that happens in and around it. Additionally, we may frequently have partners. The TIF incentive is one tool that we use in the toolbox, but we've also assisted some of the businesses down there, for example, in acquiring state grants that are specific to job creation. So as to how we would credit how much was that tool versus this tool, it's a little difficult to really pinpoint, but there have been significant job creation within downtown, and I think anyone that drives down there and tries to find parking can attest to that. Yes, sir.
Yes, I will thank you for this together.
Sure.
This is something I've been requesting in all of the city.
Good.
I thought the level of detail was fantastic for this group. I think it also gives me enough to probably come back and ask some questions.
Good.
In a little more detail, but I appreciate your time and coming down here this morning.
Thank you. And I know staff of JCDA is always available. I am individually available. If anyone ever wants to reach out to me directly, I'm happy to answer any questions I can. Yes, sir. Sure.
2087 million.
Yes, sir.
That district includes downtown Johnson City district.
It's a pretty good-sized district. Our boundaries are I-26 to the east, to John Exum and University Parkway up that way to the west. The south goes to Walnut Street, and north goes to 10th Avenue, I believe. And there's a little, the only, I take, with one exception, the only parcel that was added when we first created it, but was a bit of an outlier, that is the only parcel on the other side of I-26 is the old Big Burley pad. It does include that parcel. The old Big Burley warehouse pad.
And I will say that downtown Johnson City is still considered a blighted area by the state. The new opportunity zones that have just come about through the federal government, in Washington County, the only area that is eligible for opportunity zone initiative is the downtown or redevelopment district. It's pretty much the footprint that the state chose to use. So there is still, even though we really feel like we've done a lot, there's still a lot of properties that are left in a blighted state that need some improvement that we can work on.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I know we had a committee meeting last month. You said the debt was over $9 million.
Yes.
Is that correct? 9.143.
That's total right now, yes.
I know the county, you're saying you get $448,000 a year from the county.
That's,
our property taxes, what you
yeah.
have on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
You can pay that off for 5 years. I realize the city generates property taxes. Where does your other revenue come from? Pay that off in 5.
So that's why, if we could go back, if that's still there, I can show you. That's really why I made a point of showing you how the two of those projects are held out separately, because there's a large chunk of that debt that does make up our $9.1 million when it comes to calculating our debt ceiling. We have to show that amount. But for example, the one, and they'll pull the number up, I'm sure, but I'll try and do it from memory. The one that was shown, for example, is Tipton Street. That project, we set up that loan with a principal amount of, I believe it was $1.25 million, somewhere in that neighborhood. And yeah, they're coming up with it here.
Keep going.
That one there. Or actually, I'm sorry, two more. There you
There
go.
you go.
So $1,434,675 is debt we have to show on our books as debt in terms of calculating our total debt ceiling right now. But because of the way that particular one functions, I believe this year was the first year that their payment was received and then turned back around and made as payment on that debt was just barely $30,000. And they've got a term of, and I'd have to look it up, so don't hold me to it, but I want to say somewhere 12 to 13 years remaining on that note, which means you're never going to pay that full amount of debt, and the way the loan was structured, any remaining balance at the end of that term is written off and forgiven. So when you go to calculate the period of time, what we're doing is we look at what our total cash flow is right now from city and county. We back out the amount that we received specific for Tipton Street and the amount we received specific for University Edge. Then we use that amount that's remaining, which is available to service the remaining debt, which if you go back 2 slides, please.
I got a question about that.
Okay.
So that debt is still your debt, that $4 million. What you're saying is after a period of payments are made, which will never equal out, the debt still be written off by your board, so your board will pay the debt.
No, written off by, so when we talk, and I'm sorry, I should have pointed that out. Again, the way that debt was structured, the developer is also the lender, so they're the ones that writes that off at the end of the term. It is, and that's why I say the first 2 were done that way. We had a different director and all sorts of other things. We've certainly learned better ways to do it since then. but we are stuck with it.
So, Mr. Torres, you said the lender, the developer was the lender?
Yes. That's why it effectively functions as pure tax abatement. So in the case of, we'll use the University Edge project, the fellow that developed that, they were the lender to us of that amount, but there was no actual transfer. It was a loan given, and then our payment back to them is the amount that they pay each year in taxes. Excuse me, not their total amount in taxes, the amount that we receive as increment.
So it gains each year, it picks up, they pay you back more each year?
Yeah, it has been increasing as their property value has increased and their taxes have gone up. And same way with Tipton Street, as I said, the Tipton Street project, I know this year was the first year that it had gone over $30,000 in property taxes for the year.
And so that's all they're really paying you back, is that $30,000 amount?
Exactly. And so we don't ever pay more than we receive from them, and at the end of that term, they forgive whatever remaining principal there is.
If the taxes go up, does that amount go up? So, like when we raise taxes 40 cents?
Yes.
That amount coming back to you would go up that 40 cents addition?
Yes.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, though? So when you take those off, these are the only projects that are remaining that the cash flow actually has to service the debt. I believe it's just a little under that.
The only 2 incomes that you have are from the county's property taxes in the city.
That is correct.
I know you said ours is 448. Do you know what the city's is?
If you'll bear with me, I do have it right here. It's significantly more. I'll get you the exact number, but it's 600 and something. Our total right now is about between 950 and 970, 980. And I'll get you that exact number here in just a second. Yeah, and the reason for that is because the city, all those, when we showed you the amount that we hold back for the county, either debt service, the 25% holdback in the uncollected amount, the city doesn't do that. We get 100% of their increment.
Let me ask you a question too, because I've been researching this and it's complicated. When you say this, for instance, let's take the model mill, $1.2 million. That's debt that you incurred through the JCBA. That we're paying for. Where does that money go to the actual person who's renovating in that building, and how
So
was it dispersed?
it depends a little bit on the project. The majority of them have gone back. So for example, the model mill was done through a purchase resale, but also actually I think all the phase one has been done in direct infrastructure projects. So on some of these, we have purchased and then resold at a lower amount, which injects a direct increment or incentive into the project. On the mill, there was so much remediation and other direct infrastructure that we were able to pay those directly. We have pretty strict guidelines that come from the state as to what we can use TIF funds for. So it has to be public infrastructure, acquisition, things like that. So to your earlier question, the total amount of all of those total to $4,859,872. We have the current commitments to Tipton Street and University Edge are $242,290 annually. Our total revenue or cash flow coming in both from city and county as of 2018 was $941,473. That gives us cash available to service this debt of $699,183. But we also have a fund balance currently in the TIF fund of $1.8 million. So if you reduce the outstanding debt by that and then use that cash flow to amortize, that's how we arrive at 4.7. We currently have a blended.
$11 million, correct?
That's correct. And that's why I say that does include those two projects, which again we have to show at those higher amounts. But the reality is it's significantly less. But and by the way, the blended interest rate right now on these projects is 3.5%.
One more question, I'll shut up.
No, you're good.
When do you see it at the end of this? It's been going on for 10 years, and I feel like the county taxpayers have paid a tremendous amount of money to help reboost this area. I mean, when do you see an end to this coming where we can see some revenue coming back to the county?
So two factors to that. One is, as I pointed out on the earlier slide, there is about 47% of the revenue being generated from this is coming back to the county now. And I would argue that because of the effectiveness of this, the growth rate within the district is significantly outpacing your growth rate in the remainder of the county. So the reality is, as far as growth on your tax base, you're actually seeing more dollars in revenue coming in from this district growing faster right now, even while you're giving the funds over for incentive, than you are in the county at large. And I think that's partly a testament to the effectiveness we're having. More specifically to the question of when we see it winding down, I think the reality is, while we are very proud of the success that we've seen, as Diana pointed out earlier, it takes only a drive through the area to realize that there is still tremendous amount of vacancies, of buildings that have not been touched, of very large buildings in some cases that have perhaps been in the news recently that we may be bringing forward soon, that have some opportunities before them. My belief is as long as the tool is working and you're getting a good return on it for yourselves and the taxpayers, then let a good thing continue. I believe very strongly, however, that the single biggest issue is that but-for test. I think there very much will come a time, I don't know exactly how or when to quantify that time, but there will come a time when you can look at these buildings and realize that because the value has increased to a certain point and the rents that they can claim as a result of that have increased to a certain point, then there will come a time when an incentive is not necessary to get someone to come in and rehab that building versus going out and building in a green field somewhere. But until that time happens, it's an unlevel playing field. And the reality is by incentivizing, while we are putting some taxpayer money back into this, that taxpayer money a lot of times is going to be less than what it would be to try and run new infrastructure to a green field that might be just outside of that space. By reusing these facilities and these buildings, you've already got utilities there, you've got water, sewer, all these types of things, police, fire, everything's already covering these districts. So that by itself, yes, we're giving some incentive to reuse what's existing, but that's also saving money by not coming and asking either city or county to go and expend funds to continue to expand out into greener space that may not have those facilities.
Well, kind of a point of clarification, because while the program is out there, you know, for an extended period of time, each one of the projects you showed us has a specific end date relative to those incentives. And so it's not as if the model bill will go on forever.
Right.
It has a specific start date and a specific end date, correct?
Exactly.
And so there is a difference between the individual projects and the program as a whole.
Exactly.
And one additional question, you spoke a lot about the redevelopment district, and obviously everything that's been done so far has been within that district. But in terms of TIF, the program itself, there's no reason that there couldn't be other TIF districts within Washington County.
Absolutely.
Okay, and so, but obviously the initiative just has to come from some group.
There's a couple factors to it. One, exactly, the initiative has to come from some group. There are only a couple of groups designated that can administer it. So, for example, JCDA, we could operate any within the confines of Johnson City, but the county has other agencies that could operate them outside of the city if they chose to do so. Diana touched on the fact that there does have to be some form of designation of a blighted area. In our case, the district, we didn't just randomly choose that district. That was the district that was drawn by the U.S. Census Bureau. And so that's why we used it. And then for other reasons, one of our, I believe it was a city commissioner at the time specifically, was hopeful that we might see some ability to do something with the Burley pad. So that was the only additional parcel that was not originally part of that U.S. Census designation. So that designation can come from a lot of places. In our case, we relied on the U.S. Census data.
And in response also to Commissioner Harris, yeah, I do remind you that you as County Commission have the ability to approve a project. And so we don't bring, we even though you can say we want this to end or whatever, we bring every project to you. So you have a lot of control in what is being approved. And so, you know, I hope that you see that there's some due diligence that goes into making sure a project is eligible for TIF funding, that we have several different boards that it goes through so that it is well vetted. And but then the initial authority actually comes before you. So when we come and bring you a project, know that it's been very well vetted, but also that you have the ability at any time to say we're not going to approve this.
I understand that. I guess personally, I guess one of the biggest things that bothers me is this. And you're looking at nearly $500,000 a year of county tax dollars that's been spent not by the county. I feel like that money belongs to the county. We, as the county and the county commission, should see where that money is to be spent versus some board, which you've done good things, it seems. I go to downtown Johnson City. I'm not saying there's not good things that happen down there, but I think that's an awful lot of money, the tax dollars, to be given to a different group that goes to private individuals. And I voiced that to you the last time I spoke. I feel like it's taking money as a movers. I don't like that.
And the issue there is while we're not, I would take issue with the concept of picking winners and losers only for the fact that I continually come back to that test of but for. What we're really doing, and my answer again to the question of when do we wind it down, at whatever point that you feel like that someone that comes to our area and sees an equal opportunity to invest and get a return out of an investment in the downtown area versus just going and building new, then at that point, I will be the first to tell you, then we don't need an incentive at that point. Be the first one to say it. We're not there. The costs of everything from ADA compliance to when you deal with these old buildings, you deal with asbestos abatement, you deal with we've got to deal with parking issues still, which is another issue that all downtowns deal with. But you've got a lot of life safety, fire escapes, sprinkling on upper floors, a lot of these things that you simply do not have to deal with if you want to go and build brand new in an open field. And while you are required to do that, that puts an unlevel playing field within the district. Absolutely anyone who wants to come forward and put together a project within the district, we absolutely look at it and look at why and how their potential project would compare to what they could do or what the cost would be if they did it outside of our district, and try to make that level playing field. That's really all we're trying to do. And that, again, is not terribly unlike different types of incentives that the county uses to great effect, whether it's an industrial development. You know, you go out and build a brand new industrial park, wonderful use of funds, fairly high amount of cost in land acquisition, building the infrastructure, bringing the things that are required out there to then incentivize to get people to come in and hopefully bring their businesses here. Different type, but same thing.
Is it fair to say, though, with the TIF, those incentives are not put in place until the project exists, versus an industrial park where you may buy land and do infrastructure with no promise of the project?
Right, and again, I'm not trying to put it on a footing of either or. I think both are extremely valuable, but you're exactly right. An industrial park doing some sort of economic development in that regard is more a hope of, if we build it, we hope they come. Where here, just to give you some background, I was involved in this when we first set up TIF, and at that time we had a very different makeup, of course, both of county and city. But at that time, really, the pushback was more from the city side. And the concern was that regardless of what we might do in incentives, that we simply wouldn't get anybody to buy into it. And so really that's when, through some research and talking to people outside the state, I became aware of, and our board became aware of, tax increment financing, which is a method of simply saying, you put this in place, and if no one comes, then there is no increment. And if there's no increment, there's no incentive. So you, by definition, cannot spend more. And to one other point that you made of this being county taxpayer dollars, you're absolutely right. It is county taxpayer dollars. But it's also important to note that every single bit, and in fact only 57% of those dollars, of the dollars being used, but all of the dollars that we use within TIF are being used or being generated by the businesses and the properties in that district. There is absolutely no increment or any county fund that's being taken from a piece of property tax revenue that's generated outside of this district. Every single bit of it is generated inside the district, and even then only 57 cents on the dollar. Yes, sir.
Very good question. You mentioned that since 2008, the present value of properties in this area has gone up to $87 million. How much as taxpayers have we spent to get that $87 million increase?
Well, our total indebtedness right now, as we said, shows at like $9 million, but only 5 of that is what I would consider actual. I'd say, and this is somewhat of a ballpark, but you're somewhere between the 5 and 6 million, because there's been a few projects we've financed directly.
$87 million increase. That seems like a good investment today.
And keep in mind that 6 million is, I think from that you might also want to back out, because that value of increase is the increase of properties on the tax rolls. As you saw in the earlier slide, there's been just under 5 million of direct ownership of public facilities that we've put money into, the pavilion, the Northeast State project, and so on.
I don't think you can fairly say that $87 million can all be attributed to the TIF in that area. My property taxes at my house, my appraised values went up, and probably everybody else's here has in the past 10 years. So, you know, your appraised value of properties is going to go up. And I'm sure some has, but I think you're really shooting for the sky when you say the whole $87 million appraised just because of the TIF. I think that's
well, and in fairness, we don't pretend to say that every single penny of that is only because of the TIF. And to your point, yes, the property taxes across the city, across the county have increased during that same period. However, the rate at which the values have increased within the district has been significantly higher than the rest of the county, significantly so. And I think a large chunk of that is because of this type of incentive.
All right, do we have any more questions for Mr. Short? All right, Ms. Cantler, thank you all for being here this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good presentation.
Thank you very much.
All right, our next item is receive and consider the minutes from the October 22nd, 2018 regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners that have been previously mailed to you. Do we have a motion to approve? Motion made by Commissioner Light, seconded by Commissioner Fitzgerald to approve the meeting minutes. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. The motion passes. Next item is election appointments and confirmations. Consider Resolution 181101 is a resolution reappointing 3 members to the Audit Committee on page 7. Mayor, are all 3 of those up for a reappointment?
Yes, sir.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Motion made by Commissioner Wheeler, seconded by Commissioner Carriger to approve the resolution. Discussion? Seeing none. Madam Clerk, if you'll switch us to the voting screen, please. Go ahead and cast your vote and lock it in. Madam Clerk, if you'll announce the vote, 15 yes, 0 no, 0 absent, resolution passes. Next item is the Circuit Court Clerk has entered to receive and enter into the minutes of the Washington County Circuit Court Clerk's Supplemental Employee Handbook. That's on page 9. Is there any discussion? The Circuit Court Clerk is here if there's any questions.
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Motion made by Commissioner Harris, seconded by Commissioner Light to receive and enter into the minutes the Washington County Circuit Court Clerk Supplemental Employee Handbook. Commissioner Tester. We do not have to. I think his motion was just to accept them. Yes. We are not approving these, we are just accepting these. All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of that motion of accepting these into the minutes, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. All right, motion passes. Next item is the Commercial, Industrial, and Agricultural Committee report. Commissioner Carriger?
You'll see our minutes of the November 1st meeting. It's on page 11 of the handout. Glad to answer any questions. I think the minutes are pretty self-explanatory.
Thank you. Any questions for Commissioner Carriger? Seeing none. Next item is the County Attorney's report. Mr. Seeley?
I have no written report. To answer any questions, I would like to give the Commission a little good news. We did find out last week that the lawsuit filed by Gerald Sensabaugh was dismissed. He does have a period of time, 30 days, to appeal that decision, so we'll wait and see if there's an appeal filed, and then I'll report back either in December and January when we find out. That was good news that we received.
Thank you, Mr. Seeley. Any questions? Seeing none, the next item is the county mayor's report. Mayor Grandy? Happy Thanksgiving, Mayor. The Director of the Health Department is not with us this evening, but she will be here next month to bring us an update of influenza shots and things like that going on at the school. The Director of Schools, he is not with us this evening either. They had a called meeting, and he was unable to attend our meeting. Next item is the Employee Compensation and Benefits Committee. Commissioner McAllister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This report on page 12, and this tells us for our health costs for the first 3 months. And also, Michelle Stewart gave us a report on care here on our clinic. You can see it's a very, some of the details are further on the pages there in your pack. So, we'll report on that. If there are any questions, that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner McAllister. Seeing no questions, next item is the Health, Education, and Welfare Committee. Commissioner Edens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You'll find the HUE Committee minutes on page 22 in your packet. I, too, will be happy to try to answer any questions you may have. We also have 2 action items. Resolution for environmental cleanup of 2 properties. At this time, we'll go to resolution number 181102. The resolution for cleanup of 120 Davies Court, Ellsworth, Tennessee. I bring that to you in the form of a motion.
Motion made by Commissioner Edens, seconded by Commissioner Ford to approve the resolution. Discussion.
All the questions.
Question's been called. Madam Clerk, if you'll switch us to the voting screen. Go ahead and cast your vote and lock it in. Madam Clerk, if you'll announce the vote, 15 yes, 0 no. Resolution passes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our second resolution is resolution number 181103. It's for the environmental cleanup of 157 Buttermilk Road, Gray, Tennessee. I bring that to you in form of a motion.
Motion made by Commissioner Eden, seconded by Commissioner Lott to approve the resolution. Discussion. Question's been called. Madam Clerk, if you'll switch us to the voting screen. Go ahead and cast your vote and lock it in. Madam Clerk, if you'll announce the vote. 15 yes, 0 no. Resolution passes.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes our report.
Thank you. Any questions for Commissioner Edens? Seeing none, the next item is the Investment Committee. Commissioner McAllister.
You'll find our, that's what the Chairman did on page 43 is our report. And what you sure taking folks, I talked to them about the investments we had. If there are any questions, we won't have to take any questions. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Seeing no questions, the next item is the Public Safety Committee report. Commissioner Horley. Motion made by Commissioner Wheeler, seconded by Commissioner Fitzgerald to approve the resolution. Discussion. Commissioner Tester.
I have a quick question. Both of these, I think, say that they are budget amendments, but the money's being taken from a line item for that purpose. So, is that really a budget amendment? Or is that, are we just approving?
We should.
Taking that line item, budgeted money,
So really, we're just approving.
but it's a budget line, correct? It's coming out of the lab
that's 740. But we're not really amending the budget, it's another 30. It's already like it's in line.
Thank you, Commissioner Tester. Any other questions? Thank you, Commissioner. Question's been called. Madam Clerk, if you'll switch us to the voting screen, go ahead and cast your vote and lock it in. Madam Clerk, if you'll announce the vote, 15 yes, 0 no, the resolution passes.
Mr. Chairman, the second resolution is resolution 181105, in translation of purchase translation of Conrad River Crossing, Old River Road. That comes from the motion.
Motion made by Commissioner Wheeler, seconded by Commissioner Light to approve the resolution. Discussion? Commissioner Edens?
Commissioner Wheeler, that 181105, that address should be Miller Crossing and Greenwood Drive. I came with the fire chief that requested that to your meeting, and it may have got mixed up in our translation, but Miller Crossing sits at dead center between Old Emerald Drive and Highway 81 South. And to put it on Emerald Drive, it's putting it at one corner instead of in the center. If we put it in the center, the request was to put it at Greenwood Drive and Miller Crossing. That way it was going to be easier to service the entire area.
Mr. Chairman, move in favor of the motion to amend that.
Okay, we have a motion to amend. Second by Commissioner Tester. We are amending the description of Miller Crossing and Greenwood Drive. Discussion about that motion? Question's been called. All in favor of changing Old Emerald Road to Greenwood Drive signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. Now we are back to the resolution as amended. The amendment would be Greenwood Drive on Resolution 181105. Discussion on the amendment, on the amended motion. Question's been called. Madam Clerk, let's switch to the voting screen, and we'll vote on the motion as amended, 181106. I'm sorry, 181105. Madam Clerk, if you'll announce the vote, 15 yes, 0 no, resolution passes. Anything else, Commissioner Edens?
No, sir. Thank you.
Or Commissioner Wheeler, might I say? Well, I see if Commissioner Edens needs anything too, you know? All right. Absolutely. Yes, thank you. All right. Our next item is the Public Works Committee. Commissioner Davenport.
Yes, you'll find our minutes for our November 1st meeting on page 55. We have one resolution tonight. It's resolution 181106 in the form of a motion. Resolution authorizing repair and paving services by the Washington County Highway Department for the town of Jonesboro.
All right. Motion made by Commissioner Davenport, seconded by Commissioner Ford. Discussion?
Call for question.
Question's been called. Madam Clerk, if you'll switch us to the voting screen. Go ahead and cast your vote and lock it in. Madam Clerk, if you announce the vote, 15 yes, 0 no, Resolution passes. Anything else? Any questions for Commissioner Davenport? Seeing none, the Register of Deeds is placed on the agenda tonight. Mrs. Bowman, to receive and enter into the minutes of the Washington County Register of Deeds Supplemental Employee Handbook. It's on page 61. I would like to have a motion just to accept these. Commissioner Tester, seconded by Commissioner Light, to accept these minutes into the meeting minutes. Discussion? Seeing none. Have a question? All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. Motion passes, and show these minutes entered into the record. Next item is the Rules Committee. Commissioner Tester.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our minutes are on page 64 of the packet. We discussed 3 different topics related to our rules. The first being the video and commission meetings. The second was new business topics at meetings, and related to that, things like agendas and public notices and so forth. And then the third topic was the committee on committees election. 2 of those we can talk to you more about continuing that this next meeting. We've also had a request to look at our public comment rules. We'll be doing that coming up. And if anybody has anything else you'd like us to look at, please let Mr. or another committee member know.
Thank you, Commissioner Tester. I know that's a big job, starting into those. Any questions for Commissioner Tester? Seeing none. The Washington County Library Board of Trustees. Who sits on the library committee? The mayor did. Mayor, Mr. Griffiths is here with us as well.
Right, this resolution 1811 is merely budgeting money that was received on the grants and budgeting it into the revenue that we're putting into the expense.
All right. We have a motion made by Commissioner Ford to approve the resolution, seconded by Commissioner Fitzgerald. Discussion? Seeing none. Question's been called. Madam Clerk, if you'll switch us to the voting screen. Go ahead and cast your vote and lock it in. Madam Clerk, if you'll announce the vote. 25 yes, 0 no. Resolution passes. Next item is the Budget Committee report. Mayor Grandy? Budget Committee. Yeah, we're not going to let you off too easy here. All right. The Budget Committee report. Mr. Wheeler?
Our minutes are on page 70 of the packet, and we have 3 resolutions for your consideration. The first being resolution 181110, 676, approving purchases from the highway department.
All right. Was that in form of a motion, Commissioner?
Yes, that's a motion.
Thank you. Seconded by Commissioner Light. Motion made by Commissioner Wheeler. Discussion?
Question.
Question's been called. Madam Clerk, if you'll switch us to the voting screen. Go ahead and cast your vote and lock it in. Madam Clerk, if you'll announce the vote, 15 yes, 0 no, resolution passes. Commissioner Wheeler?
The next item is resolution 181111, number 679. This is to approve repair of basketball situation units.
Motion made by Commissioner Wheeler, seconded by Commissioner Ford to approve the resolution. Discussion?
Question.
Question's been called. Madam Clerk, if you'll switch us to the voting screen. Go ahead and cast your vote and lock it in. Madam Clerk, if you'll announce the vote, 15 yes, 0 no, resolution passes. Commissioner Wheeler? Oh, that finishes your report, doesn't it? Wow. All right. We have no old business to consider, but we do have a notary's resolution. 181108 is a resolution approving the election of notaries, public for appointment or reappointment for Washington County, Tennessee. Do I have a motion to approve? Motion made by Commissioner Eden, seconded by Commissioner McAllister to approve the resolution. Discussion? Question's been called. Madam Clerk, if you'll switch us to the voting screen. Go ahead and cast your vote and lock it in. Commissioner Ford, we need you to lock it in. Thank you. Madam Clerk, if you'll announce the vote, 15 yes, 0 no, resolution passes. Also, a resolution under new business, Resolution 181109, is a resolution scheduling our regular meeting dates and times for the Board of County Commissioners for 2019. Motion made by Commissioner Tester, seconded by Commissioner Carriger. Commissioner Light, did you have a question? Question's been called. Madam Clerk, if you'll switch us to the voting screen. Go ahead and cast your vote and lock it in. Madam Clerk, if you'll announce the vote, 15 yes, 0 no, resolution passes. Next item is a discussion topic regarding a workshop proposal for the Washington County Commission. Commissioner Jones had spoke to me about this several times and had a great proposal. And it was so great, we wanted Commissioner Jones kind of to lead this topic of discussion here for just a few minutes. Now, we probably won't be voting on a proposal, but maybe making a referral or something back to the committee.
Thank you. I bring this proposal to you all tonight. An opportunity for a group of us to get together and discuss our goals for the next few years. I have just a loose couple of objectives listed there. Mainly the opportunity to discuss goals, also consider maybe strategic plan, and get to know each other a bit more, since we have the better part of our term ahead of us. I had a chance to talk with some other county and city commissioners who indicated that this has been a successful strategy for them, and then in talking with Pat Hardy, who's part of NTAS, heard that he has facilitated these types of meetings for many commissions, and felt that it would be a good opportunity for us to consider. What I have listed there are some proposed timeframes and dates. And what I would suggest is that we have a short conversation tonight about timeframes and dates, and then perhaps move it to one of our existing committees for kind of getting into the weeds and coming up with the details in terms of a location and getting in touch with Pat and discussing a format for the time and even like food and some of those other logistics. So I'll just tell you that Pat suggested that having an overnight and doing the meeting out of town is his favorite option. He feels that people commit much more to the group and the discussion when they're not close to home. And I realize that option comes with cost. I'll say that I did just make a couple of quick phone calls. It's a very inexpensive time, January, to travel just about anywhere. So I put it on the page there. I don't really feel like I don't feel strongly that we have to choose that option. I wanted to convey to you all what the expert recommended.
A compromise that would keep people from having to miss a lot of work would be a shorter, perhaps evening and full day. And another compromise would be just to keep it to a full day meeting. One possibility would be to just move it out into the county where we're not close to lots of things, and we could have a good day-long meeting there. Whether that's a Friday or a Saturday is a topic we should discuss. And then the option that Pat also provided was that we could do a half day, but that's the kind of least preferred option. So if we can just have a short discussion about people's preferences in terms of the amount of time they want to commit to something like this, if at all, and what day would be best, we can then vote on, I guess, whether to move it to a committee, an existing committee, and then go from there. Thoughts, feedback?
Jody, I guess my preference would be not to spend any money. I think if we could do it out at ETSU, you know, there's plenty of meeting space out there, and I guess early January, I don't think students are in session yet. So.
That's true.
But that'd be my preference. We don't spend a whole lot of money on this.
If we do a full day meeting, we'd just be looking at lunch. Pat is free through MTAS, so it's a pretty minimal, it's not none, but it's minimal. I can look at space at ETSU. I'll just also say that Washington College Academy in Limestone is a nice facility, and it's only $100 for the day if we want to. That's expensive. Unless ETS, I don't know. ETSU just took it over, so I don't know what their deal is.
Commissioner, can I just, what is, Sullivan County, I know the school, and the Washington County School Board, I think they do retreat too. What do they normally do?
I don't know. I don't know. I know that the city of Irwin, for example, goes to Gatlinburg overnight. It's a great question, and I would be open to hearing from other local commissioners.
I think the school board does something like that.
They do. They do. They have Gatlinburg, I think. Commissioner Tester?
I would prefer Saturday for those of us who work. And the other comment that I would make is, I think it's better to have it local. Just, it sounds like we're going to possibly be talking about some pretty important topics. So citizens should be able to come, should they not? I mean, I just think that would be easier access for citizens and local media to be there if it's local, just for openness and transparency.
Committee would be appropriate.
If I could suggest the CIA committee, I'd really like to move it to that committee.
Will you put that?
comment on that would be, we've got a full agenda this Thursday, and I'm not sure when. It looks like we're going to have a full agenda January the 3rd also. That would be my only comment.
Yep, that's true fact. I'm on that committee. I'm also on Hugh. Okay.
Commissioner Jones, I guess, Chair, if I may.
Yes.
I guess one of the reasons people want the out-of-town thing is just because there's fewer distractions, and it's less likely that you would run home at lunch or take a phone call perhaps or something. But I guess you would just hope that commissioners, if we have it local, that they would commit to being there and being engaged.
Yep. That's the main thing. We find a good location where everybody feels like they're able to focus and concentrate and be involved.
When do the students come back?
I want to say like the 15th or 16th, somewhere in that week. At where? What is it?
It's got a-
Good.
Not in the fairground.
There's a fee for that place, though. Okay.
You were committed, if we want to do this in January, we need to have another committee.
It's a great question. And I don't.
Well, I think all committees are gonna be pretty busy this time of year from what I've seen coming up from the county attorney. So just what I see ahead of us in the next couple of months, I'd say all committees will be pretty busy, so.
Chairman, do we need a motion?
Yes, I'm gonna take a motion. Thank you, Commissioner Harris, seconded here by Commissioner Wheeler. Well, maybe that is proper, Mr. Attorney, to just refer it to a committee on the vote, right? Okay. All right, we do have a motion and a second, procedurally to send this discussion over to the CIA committee for location and discussion of the venue. Maybe we could even get an agenda for that day a little bit out of Commissioner Jones, you think? Oh, yeah.
Surely.
Sure. So that way, if she is preparing the agenda, it would be very helpful in supplying her some topics for discussion. I know how it is to do an agenda, and someone just say, well, you just make the agenda and we'll be there to talk about it. So that's always a good idea to give her some ideas, and I've got some. And, so we do have a motion and a second to refer this over to the CIA committee. Is there any questions or concerns about that?
I actually have a logistical question.
Okay.
How do people give me agenda items? Can people email me though? I've been confused about this, the planning of this event for a while. Can we communicate about that in terms of topics and preferred sandwich meat and things like that? I mean, is that okay?
As far as submitting items for an agenda or getting you those ideas, it might be best just to send those emails to Sherry and let her collect those together. And she's an expert at that. And she does a great job.
She does.
And she could collect those emails for you.
Okay. Very good. Great idea.
She might even put them like in an agenda form and send them to you. She really does a good job at that. She does. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. All right. All right. I appreciate you all taking that on. I know it's going to be a busy month or two for all of us coming up. Remember, we have changed the cutoff a little bit on the date and time for next month's County Commission meeting agenda, which is Thursday, December the 6th at 12 noon. If you'll notice, 12 noon is going to be our new cutoff. As far as the packet goes, so just remember 12 noon on December the 6th. Normally at this meeting, we do bring in a few items after the meeting, and I'll get a hold of you all about something after the meeting as far as a snack. And we all share a snack downstairs if we can talk Commissioner Ford into participating with that this year. We worked him pretty hard the last 4 years. So, is that right, Commissioner Ford? Awful hard, ain't we? Yeah. I think Jan has. All right, I guess that's all the announcements. Is that right, Sherry?
Chairman, in the spirit of camaraderie and the holiday cheer and Christmas, we have organized a commission meeting, commission social for the Johnson City Commission, the Washington County Commission, and the Jonesboro Commission. We held the Storytelling Center on Tuesday, the 18th of December at 6 o'clock. And I think we've gotten some information on that, so we have some more coming out. And it was just a good agenda, there's a meeting, discuss an opportunity to spend a little time with the fellow legislators across Washington County and spread Christmas cheer.
Well, maybe, thank you, Mayor. Maybe, Mr. Ford, maybe we can get you to help with that, and that way we won't have to do two of those, one the day after the next. So let's just plan on that. Yeah, it's the Tuesday after that, so we don't want to work you 2 days in a row. Oh, we could, yeah. There's nothing wrong with cold sausage balls. All right, we have a motion to adjourn. Motion made by Commissioner Light, seconded by Commissioner Tester. We adjourn. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. We're adjourned.